Surprise, motherfucker.
What's up, guys? It's your boy, Benny. We do a politics and news show here. I'm from the state of Iowa, so I've seen a lot of people run for president up close. I was involved in politics when I was a young kid growing up in Iowa, so I got to see a lot of people running and really sort of call balls and strikes with these political campaigns. There's only two campaigns out there that really have my curiosity up, and that was the campaign that RFK and Vivek Ramaswamy. So, I mean, obviously, Joe Biden is supposed to win the Democrat nomination, and Donald Trump is cruising through the Republican primary season, it looks like. And so that's going to be the expected odds, right, for the two of those dudes. A rematch of 2020. There's a lot of people who want that, a lot of people who don't want that, but there are very interesting people who sort of like rise to the top given the environment of a very unpopular sitting president and Donald Trump, of course, surging popularity once more among the Republican base. Vivek and RFK are those two dudes. Now, RFK is making all the right friends, even though he, has a very interesting position on, Second Amendment, affirmative action, things like that. Sort of disappointed some of the people of the right that thought that he was just like a right winger. He's not. He's a Democrat, lifelong Democrat. But he is definitely a different kind of Democrat than, let's say, the Joe Biden wing of radical extremist Marxists. RFK here with Dennis Kucinich, who's himself a independent, and Ice Cube. Cool. RFK was at Ice Cube's Big 3 Summer of Fire stuff. RFK, dude, what are these meat hooks? RFK, like, he's a living, walking anti-Big Pharma ad. Guy's jacked, 70 years old. RFK making all the rounds, making all the right friends, and a lot of the right enemies. RFK tweeting pretty savagely about Joe Biden, wanting to censor Americans, including RFK. What does he say here in his Twitter bio? As president, I will end forever wars, clean up the government, restore the middle class, tell Americans the truth. And RFK is making a lot of inroads with that, including having 15% support in Democratic primary polls. This poll was taken a month ago. Sure as hell looks like he's doing quite well when it comes to actual polling, gobbling up a considerable portion of the polling as it pertains to people that are disaffected by Joe Biden. So he's doing a good job at like making the inroads that would make it competitive, and he's going to win Iowa and New Hampshire. Apparently, Joe Biden's not going to run in Iowa and New Hampshire, so you're going to have caucuses that go directly to RFK Jr. It's going to be a very interesting time. More interesting than that is that RFK, given his family's history with the deep state, and the assassinations of multiple presidents and attorneys generals and presidential candidates in his family by the deep state, he has a contentious relationship with the CIA. Let's just say that. He tells Joe Rogan that he has to be careful the CIA doesn't assassinate him. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of the danger. I don't live in fear at all, but I'm not stupid about it. I take precautions, Kennedy says, about him potentially being assassinated by the deep state. My God. So he was asked on Fox News, there's a Fox News article, he was asked on Fox News when he did a live interview with Jesse Waters yesterday about the CIA and potentially getting assassinated by the CIA. First time he's been directly asked, do you think the CIA has the capacity to assassinate you, a presidential candidate? Listen to this.
You've seen what the government's capable of with regard to your uncle, possibly with regard to your father. We've seen evidence that suggests the CIA was involved in assassinations here on American soil. In 2023, do you still think the CIA is capable of something like that?
Well, I think the CIA was involved in, certainly in this research. They were funding it through USAID. And NIH, I think, in the end, gave about $26 million in funding to the Wuhan lab. But USAID, which was functioning as a CIA surrogate, gave over $64 million, and the Pentagon also gave a lot of money.
But you didn't answer my question. The question was, is the CIA still capable of political assassinations in the United States?
I couldn't say yes or no to that question. I think that there's, I couldn't say, and even with my uncle's assassination, you can't really say the CIA killed John F. Kennedy. You can say members of the CIA, people who are working for the CIA, were definitely involved. People like E. Howard Hunt, David Atlee Phillips. David Morales, people who've confessed to it, many of them in deathbed confessions. But they may have been operating on a rogue basis rather than the CIA doing it. These were people who were involved in the Miami station who were angry at President Kennedy for refusing to invade Cuba, and also.
So RFK sort of like effectively saying, yeah, the CIA does and did have the capacity. Members of the CIA had the capacity to go ahead and kill my uncle, kill my father. He's gone into detail, actually, about this in a Mike Tyson podcast that we'll put at the end of the clip, actually, about the details of his dad's murder and why he believes the CIA was involved. Members of the CIA was involved. That's a little bit different than what he's been saying. RFK, I think, is like correcting his language here. Robert Kennedy Jr. sees overwhelming evidence the CIA involved in the JFK assassination. He's been out and saying this often and regularly. There's overwhelming evidence the CIA was involved in his murder, Kennedy said on a Sunday interview with John Catsimatidis, New York City radio station. I think it's beyond a reasonable doubt at this point. The CIA has repeatedly denied any allegation that it was involved in the death of Kennedy, who was shot while riding in a convertible in a parade in Dallas, exactly where CIA apparatchik Lyndon Baines Johnson, who went ahead and started the Vietnam War and did everything the intelligence agencies wanted him to do as it pertains to regime change and American imperialism, as soon as they got rid of JFK. LBJ, of course, also the guy that insisted that JFK go to Dallas and ride in an open-air convertible, which wasn't normal. Curious that. Boy, sure would have been nice to have a real investigation in the JFK murder, but of course we didn't get that. We got a bunch of goons who were bought and paid for by LBJ and the deep state, and that's called the Warren Commission. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just the CIA and the establishment inside of the deep state that RFK is going after. He's going after Dr. Fauci. This is one of his tried and true methods, obviously, of pushing forward against Dr. Fauci. RFK hates Dr. Fauci. RFK Jr. says the CIA was involved in funding the Wuhan COVID lab, the lab that leaked coronavirus. The CIA was certainly involved in this research. RFK said this during the same interview with Jesse Waters. The clip this is relatively new stuff that we have not heard before. Check this out.
Tell me about Fauci. You wrote this big fat book. I could only get through a little bit of it. I can't read anything longer than 700 pages. And you think Fauci is the devil. Would you prosecute him if you ever got to the White House?
I mean, if there were crimes that he committed, of course we would, I would tell the Attorney General to prosecute him and not hold off. Do I think that he committed crimes? I think he caused a lot of injury. I think that he, particularly by withholding early treatment from Americans, we racked up the highest death count in the world. So we only have 4.2% of the globe's population, but we had 16% of the COVID deaths in this country, and that was from bad policy. There's countries that did the opposite of what we did, that provided ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, other early treatments to their populations, and had 1/200th of our death rate. So there are many, many things that we did wrong in this country, and some of those were, I would say, knowingly. That some of the things that were done by public health officials at that time, that they knew that they would be harmful to.
Why hasn't the Biden administration punished China?
Punish China for what?
For the lab leak, for withholding PPE during the pandemic?
Well, I think one of the reasons we haven't investigated the Wuhan lab is because the U.S. government, not just through NIH, but through the CIA and through USAID, was actually funding the studies in the Wuhan lab. And we did a very, very big technology transfer of bioweapons technology to the Wuhan lab, and bioweapons technology that was developed at NIH expense.
You've seen what
So that's a new one, but not if you've been listening. I think the CIA was involved, certainly, in this research. Kennedy proclaimed the funding was through USAID. This is something that was set up via the Patriot Act, one of the possibly the worst bill to ever pass our Congress. It gave $26 million in funding to the Wuhan lab, and its function was a CIA surrogate. Gave over $64 million. The Pentagon also gave money. They were doing this apparently to develop bioweapons research. But what they did is they ended up developing a bioweapon. It was very, very useful to them because, well, it got Donald Trump out of office. Getting people out of office that you don't like is certainly something that the CIA is adept at. This is RFK Jr. on Mike Tyson's podcast from years ago, describing how they were able to take out his father, RFK Sr., who was the Attorney General for his brother, Jack, because he was leading in the polls, and they didn't want another Kennedy to come in and mess things up. Watch.
There were 77 eyewitnesses in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel when my father was killed. And many, many of them had a view of what happened. You know, very few of them could view the whole scene, but they could view parts of it. Everybody, without exception, places Sirhan from 5 feet to 10 feet away from my father in front of him. He never got behind him. He was always in front with a table between them, a steam table. Sirhan fired 2 shots at my father. The first one hit Paul straight in the head. The second one hit a door jamb at my father's head level behind my father. Then he was grabbed by Carl Olker, who was the concierge at the Ambassador Hotel, and by Rafer Johnson and 6 other people. There was a dog pile, and they all piled on him, and they grabbed, the first thing they did was grab his hand. They directed in the opposite direction, and they could not get the gun away from him. And he was powerful as a Superman, they said. So they were all trying to take the gun away from him.
This big.
He's a little guy. And he fired 6 shots in the other direction. All of them hit people. One person got hit twice, but all those bullets are accounted for. There were only 8 chambers in his gun, and 2 were fired toward my father and 6 in the opposite direction, and we know what happened to every one of those bullets. My father was shot 4 times. One of the shots, and all 4 times were from behind. What? And with a gun and they were all what the coroner, Thomas Noguchi, said, contact shots. And the barrel of the gun was touching my father when the trigger was pulled.